Welcome to day 2 of Election Bites, 10-minute portions of information on things related to the US election. I'm Soyia Ellison, and I am an associate director of democracy. I can't speak today, guys. I apologize.
Welcome.
I'm an associate director of communications here at the Carter Center, and I'm joined by David Carroll, who is the director of our democracy program. David, thank you for being with us today.
Hi, Soyia. It's a
Uh,
great pleasure to be with you again today.
Thank you. So, listen, this talk is called An International Observer Looks at the US Election. But I think it's important to get out there straight off the bat that we are not observing this election. So, can you talk about what we are doing?
That's right. We are not observing, at least in the way that we would traditionally do things internationally. So, in for this election in the United States, the first time we've engaged in the United States, we're focusing on trying to provide public information. We're doing a number of different things, many of which actually have been completed, and they're all are united around the theme of increasing transparency to build trust around the U.S. elections. And it's about getting good, reliable information out to the public, because what we know from our international experience is that good information is key and transparency is key for there to be public confidence in elections. So
Okay.
we've should I give you some of the things we've been doing in particular?
Yeah,
Sure.
sure.
We've completed a report on the laws and regulations around the 50 states on what observers can have access to, and it varies widely across the states, both political party, poll watchers, independent citizen observers, and international observers. We've done a guide with the National Vote at Home Institute about transparency around the absentee ballot vote by mail processes. We're engaging in a public information campaign with animated videos about both one video that's already been produced on voting and the importance of citizens understanding that they have options and how they can vote and be sure that their votes can be cast and counted. And another video that will be completed at the end of this week and will be released soon about what to expect after the elections and the fact that it might take longer than what we're used to have results clear, and that it's important to be patient and allow the process to run its course. We've done some journalist training webinars, and we've been doing a variety of important uh, short fact sheets about key issues in elections. We're
Okay, so
also a
I'm gonna
member
I'm gonna
now.
cut in on you there. Can I cut
Yeah,
in on you to
please,
ask you another
please.
question?
Yeah,
So look,
please.
that's a great roundup of some of the things that we're doing, but I want to get to this part of the discussion, which is about
Sure.
your personal experience because you have you've been involved in over 80 of our Carter Center election observation missions. So I wanted to ask you if you could put on your metaphorical observer t-shirt and tell us if you were coming in as an outsider, what are a couple of things that would concern you about this election?
Right. The reason we engaged this year, again, for the first time, is that we started it became more clear to us that the things that we get worried about internationally, the things that get us to prioritize other countries for Carter Center observation or Carter Center engagement, we were starting to see much more clearly in the United States this year. And that's about questions like clear signals that there's a lack of trust in election institutions. That traditionally the United States hasn't been characterized by a sense that a lot of the public worries that the election results might not be credible or that people might not accept the result. And we have a major candidate even saying that they don't think they could accept the result unless they win. Um, Things like the degree of political polarization and racial strife that we've seen in this country, increasingly over the last 5 years, but especially this year. Those things and the disinformation that's surrounding the elections are the kind of things that would make us think this is an election that could be an important test. There should be more attention paid to it.
Okay. And I know I've heard you say before that in some ways the US does not meet international election standards. Could you talk about just a couple of ways we don't meet that standard?
Sure. We've one of the things that we came to appreciate over the long arc of our work on election observation is as we've assessed other countries, we couldn't help but be aware of what the United States would look like if we used those same benchmarks. And one of the things that the United States is extremely an outlier on is the degree to which our process is decentralized to the states. So, unlike just about any other country that I can think of, the United States has down to the state level and below that in many cases authority for administering elections, and even the laws and the rules and processes around that are down to the state level, so that you have very different ability for people to engage in the election process. Most countries have a central election administration, and there will be uniform processes. People will know what the process is, how to access it, what voter identification requirements there will be, how they should get registered, and voter registration is much easier. So, in short, we have a cluster of issues that come around to a problem of lack of equal access to the voting process in this country. That's probably the major one. We don't have, but it's related, we don't have independent election administration. We have decentralized, but also in most states, partisan election authorities. So elected secretaries of state or people who work for the Secretary of State often are partisan, and they have the ultimate responsibility for overseeing elections. We also have a lot of problems with lack of transparency in campaign finance spending, and so just to name a few.
Okay, so with all of that you just said, are we doomed? Is there any good news here for this election?
Yes, I think there are things that can be a cause for optimism. We do have this history of being a country where there has been strong institutions. We have a history of good elections that people have accepted the result, in spite of this lack of uniformity and difficulty in some states for some persons, especially minorities, to have access to polls. We have a history of election administration that's very tried and true. Um, we also have a very vibrant civil society, and once it gets energized and engaged, there's a great deal of activity and room for it in this kind of liberal open society that we have. And so you've seen over the last couple of months many people and organizations jumping in to get engaged in this process. And I think it's a cause for optimism that it took a while, in a typical fashion. It took a while for people to really hyper focus on this election, but it's everywhere now. People are really engaging, and I think there's a sense that there will be a lot of eyes to this process. And we have, at the election administration level, as I said, the practices are well established. There's guardrails, there's processes that election administrators will use. I know we'll have an election bite later this week with Tammy Patrick, who will be talking more about some of the guardrails that are, in place across the states. So those things, I think, and the role of the media and the attention that the media is paying to how this election is different, there's many reasons to be optimistic in spite of the challenges that we face this year.
Okay, good. So we've only got about a minute left, but one of the
Mhm.
things that we do whenever we have an observation mission is at the end we have a report and we make some recommendations for how to make future elections better. From your standpoint, what are one or two key things that Americans should do after this election, no matter the outcome, to make our
Just
democracy strong?
just one or two.
Just one or two.
Okay. It's the flip side of the problems that we mentioned. I would say it's important. Well, first of all, there's been legislation that's been stuck in Congress for several cycles now. The Voting Rights Act needs to be passed because it's going to start to try to address this discriminatory practices across states, uneven access to the polls. We need a Voting Rights Act to really ensure that there'll be more uniformity of the election process across the states. We would benefit from having reform of this partisan election administration, the practices that we have, so that it's removed from party or elected officials and can be more in an independent authority, which most countries do that have good elections, and there are a few states in the U.S. where there's models that can be followed. Similarly, we need independent districting commissions. Again, there's a few states that have established this, but typically our election districts are set by state houses that are often very politicized, and it's not done with a way to really ensure that there's an independent authority that's making these choices. And I think overall, we need another election reform commission. President Carter has been co-chair of two of these after 2000 and I think 2004, 2005. we I think I think most people will agree it's time for a deep look at the elections in the United States as a whole, because there's many areas, and not just the ones I mentioned. There's a whole slew of things related to campaign finance and disinformation and information on social media platforms that we really need to take a long, hard look and figure out how to do this better in the United States.
Okay. Thank you so much, David, for taking the time to be with us today and share some of your insights and experience. And thank you guys for watching. We'll be back here tomorrow at 1 o'clock. And this time we'll have one of our other experts, Larry Garber, who will be talking about what to expect on election night and beyond. Thank you and have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Soya. Bye bye, everyone.